The Rebel Capitalist Show.
Let's move on to another topic I think you might have touched on with Rickards, but I'd love to get your view on just in general, central bank digital currency and the probability that we have that here in the United States. I think if you look at Lacy Hunt's argument, I think this is kind of Jim's argument as well for being very long-term deflationary. As you just look at the balance sheets, commercial banks really don't have anyone to lend to. And if the bank balance, or excuse me, the commercial banks lend less, then there's fewer dollars created. And it just goes back to that dollar denominated debt thing that we were talking about, but just domestically instead of internationally. So I think that the Fed might know they're kind of held hostage to a certain point regarding the amount of dollars that they can get in the real economy circulating with velocity, chasing goods and services, or on the balance sheet of non-bank entities. And so they're like, okay, how do we control that? You know, because we got to bail out the government, who's the biggest debtor of all time. And we can only do that through inflation. So that's why I think there's a high probability that we get a central bank digital currency. So to Dr. Lacy Hunt's point, they can take bank reserves and turn them into legal tender. So everyone's got a bank account with the Fed. They give you your stimmy check on your app, you know, and basically people are spending bank reserves as dollars circulating in the real economy, where right now they can't do that. So that's kind of my take on it, but I'd love to get your take.
Yeah, I haven't thought it through that coherently. I mean, but I could see it. Like when somebody, you know, thoughtful tells me a story like that within the context of what I know, that's absolutely doable. I mean, and Lacy Hunt obviously is obviously somebody that most people should pay attention to when he's thinking things through. But when you like, if you just shape shift this into the middle of the next or the middle of this administration's tenure, and we do have a slowdown against the mother of all economic accelerations, which was against the mother of all pandemics. You get pandemic is the worst it is. Now it looks as good as it's going to look. Then it's going to be bad for the back half of the Democrats' reign. I mean, you could see them thinking up pretty much anything. Like, I mean, including that. Why wouldn't that be part of MMT? What better way for Kelton to express her views? Or Janet Yellen, by the way, she believes in, if you really listen to her, she's like a raging socialist. I mean, she's like, talks about the decency of a living wage. And when she grew up in Brooklyn, everyone should have had a job. I'm like, not where I grew up. I mean, it's like, you know, and I lived in Canada. I mean, it's like, you don't, I think there is limitless, they'll call this at the Fed, Bernanke, you know, was really the main storyteller on this, hook, line, sinker. He'll call it innovation at the Fed. They'll call it something like that. And, you know, AOC and everybody in that party, they'll be like, this is how we get the money directly into, and I think this was Rickards' point too. I mean, to get the money directly into the accounts of the people that can vote for us.
Yeah, Brainerd's talk about that a lot. And and by the way, I don't know if you saw AOC and Elizabeth Warren, I think Sanders and all those types, they came out and criticized Jerome Powell for not being dovish enough.
Yeah. Well, that's like, it's like, you know, you want to listen to, you know, to Prince, you know, it's just like what it sounds like when these doves are crying. But the fact this is, you know, for guys our age, we at least get that joke, right? It's like, but that's the thing with Powell. I don't know what you think about it, but I mean, I to me, it's a little weird that he wants to stay in this. Like, why do you want the job again? Are you just kind of pretending that you do so that there's stability? The guy's worth $100 million, right? He's getting his face ripped off on Twitter every time he lies to people. He's so conflicted in terms of conflicts of interest with private equity. You know, why? And you got Lyle Brainerd, to your point, sitting there with the mother of all doves, Janet Yellen, and Lyle Brainerd. That's a match made in dovish heaven. Like that would be. I mean, you have a fait accompli there. You basically forget about it. Whatever George and I and Rickards, people like us say, forget about it. It won't matter. They're just going to do it.
Yeah, I think investors really need to start thinking about political questions or answering political questions more, or in addition to the economic questions that they're typically grappling with. So I think that taxes are most likely going up. If I'd like to get your opinion on that, and if you agree, how do you think that will affect corporate profits and therefore the S&P over the next, let's say, 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, they're going up. I mean, they're going to go up, and they're going to go up on you and I, and they're going to go up on anybody who owns anything that's been going up. So that's, again, it's the timing of the tax increase within the cycle that matters. If you raise taxes today, it wouldn't matter, for the next 3 to 6 months. If you raise taxes during an economic slowdown, and it's not just taxes explicitly, like the tax I think you're asking about, just raising taxes, capital gains, et cetera, raising corporate taxes. It's raising my cost of labor. That's a tax. That's right. An explicit tax. Right. So I'm gonna make capitalists, this Canadian American capitalist, or you rebel capitalist, you should have made more money in the last, really since June of last year, than you're probably ever going to make from the pile of cash that you had before, from your pile, right? You just got, there have been oodles of ways to make money. Now you're going to have to pay on that, and you're going to be sitting there saying, holy shit, my business is slowing. I have to pay my people more. And that's going to be a big problem. I mean, that's where stagflation becomes a more of a 1970s type issue, George, because when the inflation sticks, the real problem is when workers think next, oh shit, I can't quit my job and go work over here. I'm going to lose my job and not get one. That's the kind of inflation expectations that we don't have yet. But that was obviously the 1970s. So now you're saving and hoarding because you don't know what tomorrow brings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a lot of inflation, or longer term inflation, has to do with psychology, and that's why it's so difficult to predict, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, we do have which again, sad and pathetic for Powell. He cited, in, like, you got asked about inflation expectations, and he's like, well, they're elevated, but it's kind of like, but I don't believe it. But who cares what you believe? You're a lawyer. I mean, you have no track record forecasting anything accurately. But humans are actually pretty good at it. And one of the things we've talked about already, it's not just inflation expectations in the aggregate, which is a Fed survey that has had epic highs beyond any cycle that they've seen recently. But it is people's expectation of the future cost of housing, in particular, which is a monster chart. And I don't know how that goes down. I just don't know how that's going to go down unless you have another housing collapse, which clearly this government's not going to allow happen.